On behalf of Father Costa Citaras at St. Basil, I'd like to thank His Eminence for allowing us to launch the clergy initiative here in our metropolis. This is the first of several presentations throughout the country that will be a part of the initiative grant. And also to Father George for being kind enough to help expedite this workshop. Our speakers today will be Father Paul Kostopoulos and Chris Mandelaris, who will do the second half of the program. I'll launch it off by introducing some of the data that we've been able to generate. We'll take questions. I'll take questions at the end of my presentation. We'll take a brief break. And then the second session is for clergy only. So, Father Costa wanted to be here with you today. He sends you his best. Travel is a little harder for them now, so please understand. In 1937, the Lilly family established the Lilly Endowment. It exists for three reasons. The first is to improve the state of Christianity in the U.S. The second is for community improvement, and the third is to improve education. It is an Indiana-based corporation. The religion division is run by Dr. John Wimmer, and their principal aim is to enrich the lives of American Christians primarily by supporting the efforts that make healthy congregations and strengthen pastoral and lay leadership. They have decades of research. They're very methodical in their approach. And this clergy initiative, the national initiative to address economic challenges that pastoral leaders face, was initially started when a Lutheran bishop from the Dakotas went to the Lilly Endowment and asked them for some assistance because they couldn't recruit clergy to North and South Dakota. The parishes were very small. Many of the clergymen had had careers prior to being called into the priesthood and had significant student debt. And the churches couldn't afford to recruit clergy to the parishes. And this was several years ago now. So the Lilly Endowment, along with this bishop, devised this program. And it's been used all over the country in dozens and dozens and dozens of dioceses, etc. It's never been done at a national church like we're doing at the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. It is an invitation-only program. So in February of 2016, the Lilly Endowment, out of the blue, found Father Costa's name on a retirement document because he's on the benefits committee, because they couldn't figure out who to reach out to in the Greek Orthodox Church. And they called him and said, you know, we're doing this program. We've done it in dozens and dozens of churches. We have this need. Are you the person we're supposed to talk to? And we'd like for you to submit the grant. So Father Costa put together a steering committee. We wrote the grant over the next several months. It was submitted in August. And in November of last year, we received our acceptance. It was supposed to be at Christmas. We worked really hard to do our best to put together the best program we could, and we were fortunate that we were funded early. Now, the Lutheran Church in North and South Dakota has a $3 or $4 million endowment that they use to recruit young clergy to their diocese. Instead of begging clergy to come to their diocese, the clergy are standing in line to go because they're getting student debt relief. What the Lilly Endowment research has shown over these many years is that the financial burdens that our clergy face are really significant, and they're major barriers to effective, fruitful ministry. Personal financial literacy contributes to healthy and stronger pastoral leadership. There are several studies that have been done that shows that personal financial stress affects a clergyman's ability to minister effectively. And clergy who are able to provide really good financial and managerial leadership make invaluable contributions to the health of that parish, of that ministry, and to that community as a whole. Local congregations with empowered clergy and empowered laity who have the right financial and managerial leadership skills can take that parish to another level. That data is out there. I'm not telling you anything that isn't published. I'm only basically reporting to you the studies that are out there. This is not myself speaking. This is just a compilation of several studies. Now, our grant has 3 prongs to it. The first is to launch these educational programs to teach clergy and laity. The second is to teach parish leadership, which is what we're doing today, about these economic challenges that our clergy are facing, and we don't even know it. And some of the strategies that maybe we can come up with to help our clergy. In addition, there is a Ministerial Excellence Fund that is going to be used to make grants to clergy to help them reduce their financial challenges. But this fund is fixed. At some point, we are going to need to create a longer-term funding mechanism to complement the programs that are already existing in our Archdiocese today. The most difficult slide that I had to make in this entire program was this one. What is a priest? A priest is so much more than any word that anyone can put on a slide deck. Your calling is so powerful and touches so many lives that I can't find the words to adequately describe and do justice to what it is you do for each and every one of us. So yes, you're a liturgist, and yes, you're a confidant, a first responder. If you go to the seminary booth out front, they have those little tags that say, emergency clergy. You are the Navy SEALs for a lot of things in a family's life. And you can't help but experience some degree of trauma as it relates to that. Just like a physician who handles, say, a lot of trauma in the emergency room, a lot of cancer cases, or on and on. In addition, you have to be a leader and a manager and a spiritual guide, a role model, a friend. In some parishes, you're required to maintain its ethnicity. You're the CFO, you're the CEO, you're the COO. You have to motivate, you have to teach, but more than that, you're a human being just like anyone else. Your parishioners need to realize that. And you have the same wants, and you have the same needs, and the same challenges, and the same pain that any other person has. And we've forgotten that as laity. And we're hoping through this program and the seed funding that we have, we can try to change that. So all of a sudden, taking care of your clergyman is right next to the rest of your commitment that you make to your church. Above and beyond your stewardship, you realize that your priest is no different than you are. He's just very special and very unique. So this is a bit of a busy slide, but I wanted to provide it to you to show you what the curriculum is at the seminary for a clergyman. And most laity don't look at this, but the amount of study that our clergy have to go through at our seminary to become clergymen, to receive their Masters of Divinity, is very rigorous. It's 92.5 credit hours. And you can see, I don't know that I could pass liturgical Greek. And I don't know that I could pass dogmatics or canon law. Don't underestimate the amount of education your priest has. Don't take that for granted. They have a master's degree and deserve to be cared for and treated the same way any other person with a master's degree has. And many of our clergy have had a previous career on top of this degree as well. So they're very accomplished. One of the weaknesses that's been recognized by the seminary is you look at it and there's 1 year's worth of field work of parish leadership and administration. And you'll find in our data set that this need has been voiced by the clergy in this room, that they need additional education there. So clearly the Lilly Endowment is telling us what we were scared to ask ourselves. Now, part of the Lilly Endowment is we have to ask ourselves these questions. And the questions are, what are the economic challenges that our clergy are facing? Whose challenges are they? And whose work is it to address them? And who are the people, who are the leaders in the best position to try to address these situations, these challenges, these issues? And what are the best practices? And what can we do efficiently? What are the leverage points? In other words, where can we get the most bang for our buck? I can tell you that this program is not designed to do this. Money does not solve money problems. We are not here to give out money to anyone. We are here to teach and raise awareness. We are here to teach how to fish. My job is on the laity side. We are not here to give fish. So what are our goals? Our goals are to improve the financial literacy and management skills of our clergy through educational programming and grants, which is part of what this program is designed to address. The second is to be able to increase a clergyman's ability to provide capable fiscal leadership to the parishes and ministries that they serve. And equally as important is to educate the laity on how unique the clergy family is and the special challenges they face. Sometimes, unless you ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. And we have been too scared to ask these questions as a church, as laity. We've swept it under the rug. So we've had a unique confluence of data that's come to us at the same time. There was national data out there all along, but we didn't bother to look at it. But the Lilly Endowment and some other incidents that have happened in our Archdiocese have forced us to turn inward and ask ourselves these very important questions. And our findings come from 4 studies that were basically sent to clergy, answered by clergy, and analyzed by PhDs. The first that started it was the Danielson Institute study that looked at trauma. George Stavros was the lead on that. It was done in roughly 2012, and what we found is, again, you are the first responders. Our clergy are the Navy SEALs. You're the first ones out there. You know, they're getting the bullets. Is that sometimes it takes a toll on you, and it can be traumatic. And there are components of post-traumatic stress disorder that our clergy experience. Statistically, psychologically, through psychological testing tools, it's been proven. Resilience correlates with the strength of the family and the marriage. The more resilient the family, the less this trauma affects the clergyman and his family. So we'll briefly touch on that study. In addition, in our Metropolis, through the strategic plan, through the clergy task force, and Chris Mandelaris is our coach for the strategic plan. He's kind of my boss as it relates to this. And Father Paul Kostopoulos, Father Paul Kaplanis, Father Dimitri Tsigas, and Scott Mondor, who has a PhD in industrial psychology, are the clergy task force that have compiled some very interesting data that I'd like to share with you. And these are our 2 data sets here, Goal 2.1, Clergy Development, and Goal 2.3, which is Clergy Evaluation. The final study is the data set that we generated as part of the charge we had from the Lilly Endowment to see if there really was an economic challenge in our clergy. Each and every one of these studies has a sufficient sample size that it is more than adequately powered to be statistically significant. That's very important. This isn't anecdotal. This is statistically significant data. In addition, here's a brief summary of our study that we conducted last year. Now, some of you were asked to do some of these surveys at the most awkward of times. And last year, a year ago, and all this is data that we've collected in the last 12 months, basically, we asked you to fill out the clergy evaluation survey. We sent it out the Friday before Labor Day weekend. Again, I apologize for that inconvenience. And even at sending it out at the wrong time, 2/3 of you completed the survey in our metropolis. So thank you for doing that. In our study, we sent out surveys to 654 clergy, and a quarter of our clergy responded. We also sent it to presbyteros, and we found correlation between the clergy response and the presbyteros response. So I'm not going to dwell on the presbyteros response because it correlates pretty much one for one with what we found with our clergy. In addition, there are outside sources that we've drawn on to help us. One is the Evangelical Pastor Survey that was done in 2015, again by the Evangelical community as a part of their requirement to receive the Lilly Endowment grant. Because this endowment grant is through the Lilly Endowment, the criteria are very rigorous. It's not like a bunch of Greeks policing a bunch of Greeks. This is a whole different ballgame. And the accountability standards are very high, which is really good for all of us. And they surveyed over 4,000 clergy in 19 denominations. So I think we've got a pretty good data set. And that's the best data set as it relates to economic challenges out there. In addition, there's some data that's come from a national organization of seminaries that briefly touches on seminary debt that we also have used as an outside source. Our data validates that finding as well. And then finally, the FINRA study, which is a not-for-profit organization that looks at economic literacy in the United States. It's done in correlation with the Treasury Department. Now, Clergy Goal 2.3, which is clergy evaluation, a dozen clergy, and some of you are in this room, were asked in an intensive, over an hour phone interview, what are the key metrics that make a clergyman successful? After those indices were compiled, then the formal survey was sent out, and again, roughly 2/3 of you responded. And what we find is there are a number of key metrics that the clergy have identified make a clergyman sort of a clergyman's clergyman. Of these 5, 2 relate to family, which reinforces Dr. Stavros' findings that one of the keys to psychological resilience, to be able to bear all this trauma that sometimes you have to endure, being the first responder for some very difficult situations sometimes, having a healthy family, being connected to your presbytera, help you get through it. And then the number one quality, obviously, is to be really a good listener. Now, in the national survey that we did as part of the Lilly Endowment, there are a couple key points that you need to remember. The first is that the majority of the respondents were in their 50s to 60s. Obviously, there are very few clergy that are ordained under 30 for very important reasons. But you can see the age groups are pretty interspersed, but the majority are right here at 55 to 64. The other key point is that the majority of our clergy that responded were in the Northeast, but we have representative data from all over the country. But there are 2 things you have to keep in mind when you look at the financial piece to this. The first is these clergy are at their peaks of their career, be it their earnings or ministry. The second is they live in very expensive parts of the country. Now, in Atlanta, we asked our clergy as part of Father Paul Kostopoulos' clergy education, mentoring, and leadership task force goal, how many hours do our clergy work? Our clergy are all in. over 2/3 are working 50 to 70 hours. So this is the 50 to 70 hour group, and this is the 70 and above. So you can see our clergy are working hard. It is a 7-day-a-week job for many of our clergy. Money isn't what drives a clergyman to go into the priesthood. Clearly, there's a far higher call than that. They love what they do. But we have to ask them, are you happy with your salary? Actually, no, I'm correct. And what we found is that basically 80% make below $105,000 a year. Remember, they have a master's degree, and many of them have already had another career. And they're at their peak of their earnings because they're in their 50s to 60s. That's when the majority of respondents answered. But look at how many of our clergy who live in the Northeast, who are at their peaks of their careers, are making under $70,000 a year. How many of you can raise a family in today's economy, in today's world on that, if you lived in some high cost of living areas where many of our churches are? But that's what we as laity are doing. So I found this a little surprising that the number was so low. Now, when you ask our clergy how many are satisfied with their compensation, we've got a fair number that know they're working hard, know what's going on in the world, and realize that things need to be a little better. And you'll see why as we go. My question is, to each of you as lay people, how many times, and I've seen this personally in a couple of the parishes where I've lived and served on the parish council, where the priest intentionally said, please don't give me a raise because I don't want to hurt my parish, because I love my parish. How many times has that happened? More than we can count. More than we're willing to be honest enough to acknowledge to ourselves, I think. So, again, they're not in it for the money, but they know they need a little more. And you'll see why here in a minute when you see this data. Now, again, validating how satisfied our clergy are with their calling. They love what they do. They're very satisfied with how they're interacting with their parish council, with their lay leaders, with their fellow clergy. You can see they're all in. They love what they do. They do it for 50 to 70 hours a week. And obviously, we have a need here. There's definitely a need for additional continuing education. Well, what about when we ask our clergy, and this is in the Metropolis of Atlanta, this was answered by our clergy. What percent of you have little or no interest or pleasure in doing things, or have trouble falling asleep, or staying asleep, or sleeping too much, or you feel tired and have little energy, or poor appetite, or you feel bad about yourself sometimes, and sometimes you just don't feel right? Again, they are the first responders, they're the CEO, the CFO, the confidant. On their petrachili, they carry each and every one of our souls. They are responsible for us. That is a heavy burden. And you can see what percent, several days a month, or several days over 6 months, more than half the days. Now, it's amazing how healthy our clergy are, given the emotional stress that they endure. Now, when we change gears and we shift and we ask our clergy, how would they describe their church's financial situation, you'll see that the majority of them, we're very fortunate, feel like their parishes are in pretty solid financial shape. But there are a few here that are a little shaky. But the majority of our parishes are in really pretty good shape. That's comforting. But then we wanted to see, is there a difference between parish size and a clergyman's financial stress? And I know these slides are busy and they don't translate quite as well as they do on my screen, so please forgive me. But this is high financial distress. And you can see there's a break point here at under 100 families. The clergyman is more stressed because those parishes just can't afford to pay their priest as much. 100 families seems to be the break point. So those smaller parishes have to come up with other strategies above and beyond money to help alleviate the stress that our clergy are enduring. You can see the bigger the parish, the less stress there is. Now, we asked our clergy, how do you feel about the financial culture of your church when it comes to talking about your compensation and your benefits? Is it generous? Is it professional? Is it difficult? Is it poor? Well, the good news is the majority of our parishes are very generous and very professional. But why is it that 37% of our parishes are difficult or poor when it comes to our parish councils who we elect discussing clergy benefits and salary with our clergy for these highly educated first responders? Then we asked our clergy nationally, if you ran into financial trouble, who would you turn to? And look at them. More than a third would use high-interest credit card debt. Now, fortunately, they have family and friends, but look at how few go to financial professionals. Clearly, there's a need here for more. What did the Evangelicals say about this? So the Evangelicals asked, and we can't compare apples to apples because we each asked a different question. The Evangelicals asked, what percentage of clergy, if you had an emergency, could come up with $10,000? Now you have to remember, your deductible for your health plan, just like my deductible, is like $4,500. What is it now? 6,000? So it's gone up to, there you go. Which, right. But still, you're talking about, it's not unusual that something happens and you need $5,000 or $10,000 really quick because you have an unforeseen emergency. And you can see only 15% of our evangelical brothers can cover it and be fine. The majority are in big trouble. Well, what does our data set show with our clergy? Well, you can see 47% of our clergy can't even come up with $5,000. Again, you live in the Northeast, you're working 70 hours a week, you're making less than $105,000, but the majority of you are making considerably less than that. How can you even pay your bills? How can we as laity allow this to happen? Now, in the FINRA study, 20% of Americans can't even come up with $2,000. But what you find is when you correlate it to education, only 11% of those with incomes over $75,000 can't come up with $2,000. So our clergy are in a little worse shape than the average well-educated American. The majority of Americans have 3 months' worth of salary set aside, especially if you're college educated. So again, we're a little behind the 8 ball. This is a parentheses. It's really just put in there because we had the data. I'm not trying to stir the pot about health care, but you can see that the health plan has its flaws, just like any health plan does. Our office health plan has flaws. I don't know that there are any perfect health plans out there. Now, 42% of presbyteros are working, so there's alternative sources of income. And obviously there are other sources of income as well. So 70+% of our clergy have an additional source of income to make it work, which is what the average American does. But now let's look at the retirement plan. 16% of our clergy have nothing saved for retirement, and 53% have less than $49,000. So now if you're in your 50s to 60s, you're at the peak of your earnings power, you're 10, 15 years from retirement, and you have less than $50,000 in your retirement plan, I think there's a little bit of a problem there. How many parishes have complained to the Metropolis over the mandatory contribution that's required for each parish that it has to give to the Metropolis to help assist with the retirement plan? I'm not asking for anyone to put their hand up, obviously, but clearly we're not stepping up to the plate the way we should as laity. Now, there are a few that are very fortunate. I'd like to meet those clergy. Take me out to dinner, you know? But clearly, we have a little bit of a problem here. The Evangelicals, it's skewed by a few that have very large sums, but the median is $30,000. So our clergy are really no different than any of your other brother clergy. We're all in the same boat here. Well, what about retirement savings? So we merged two questions. One is, you know, how worried are you about your retirement? You know, have you even thought about it? And you can see there's this graph right here. Look at what percent of our clergy are worried about their retirement. But they don't know what to do. They're concerned, but they don't know where to go or what to do. Again, there is a need for a program like the Lilly Endowment, and it's desperate in our Archdiocese. Now, we also asked above and beyond retirement, what percent, how much do you have in savings? Just over a quarter of our clergy have nothing in savings. Again, validating the $5,000 number. If you had to come up with $5,000, could you do it? Clearly, most of our clergy can't. You can see that. You can see that 21% have under $5,000, 28% have nothing. You can see how small these numbers are. There are no rainy days funds. How does this compare to the Evangelicals? Again, it's very similar. We're not that much different. And when we ask our clergy what percent are saving less than 5%, the Archdiocese retirement plan is a defined benefit plan. You can either do 3.5% or 5%. And then you contribute over many, many years, and then there's a defined benefit to it. You can see most of our clergy are not putting in or putting in less than the maximum amount, which is not a good situation. I was at the Center for Clergy Care strategic planning meeting in January, and there were several clergy there, and some that were there actually here in this room. And the response from some of the clergy was, sometimes I have to decide, do I pay my house note this month, or do I pay my car note this month? You're very real, very young, very engaged, very dynamic, just delightful clergymen in their presbyteros. It just really bothered me when I heard that. And they were being very candid because it was the space, the environment that we created, that Father Costa created, was one where people could be very open. What about for your child's education? So now, you're a clergyman, you had another career, you go to the seminary, you already had debt from your first degree, now you've assumed debt from your second degree, and you have teenage children who are about to go to college, which is a very real scenario for our clergy today. Well, you can see, obviously our celibate clergy, it's not applicable, but look at the rest. There's still a need there. Now, it's sort of we just assumed through Leadership 100 that every clergyman's debt when they graduated from seminary was covered. But that's not how it works. Leadership 100 donates $1 million to the seminary. The seminary then distributes that money out to the seminarians, but not every seminarian gets the same amount. In addition, the seminarians, because they've already had another career, many of them are married and are in, say, the married seminarians' housing and they have children, incur additional debt to get through school. And I have heard there's this one story, a clergyman confided in me, and he worked in the finance industry. And he was called to the priesthood. He came into the priesthood. He got through the seminary by using multiple credit cards. And he would roll the debt from one credit card to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, until he graduated from seminary with $50,000 in credit card debt. This is a man I really look up to. He's a wonderful man. He's a great priest. But that's what he had to do to get through. And we're not asking ourselves that question. I also heard, and again, I'm not bringing up this anecdotal, but it upset me when I heard it, that some of our seminarians actually go on food stamps. And I didn't believe it. I did not believe it. So I asked the seminary, and they said yes. That's what's happening. The laity don't know this. Now, we're great at building buildings. I mean, we're amazing at putting bricks down. But I hope that when you leave today, you realize that the real bricks and mortar, the healthiest and most important piece of a parish, is the clergyman. What the Lilly Endowment research has shown is that the most impactful unit in a Christian's life is their worshiping community. And the most important unit of that community is a healthy priest and a healthy clergy family. It not only impacts the worshipers, but the community where that church is as a whole. That data is published. It's not me. It's the Lilly Endowment. That's why they've created this specific program to address these economic issues, because they know through their research how important these economic challenges are. Now, you can see 40% of our clergy are carrying student debt, and 23% are carrying more than $20,000, and 8% have over $100,000 in debt. And now you understand why they carry that debt. And you can see that by age, you know, we've got some older clergy that are still carrying some significant student debt. And our young clergy really have major debt. And that's going to impact their ability to minister to us. And there is no doubt that we need ministering to more today than 1 or 2 or 3 generations ago, given how convoluted our world is becoming. Again, medical debt, there is some degree of medical debt. When we look at mortgage debt, 3/4 of our clergy carry some kind of mortgage debt. And what we find, when you look at that by age, you know, so that includes things like home equity, credit cards. There's a fair amount of debt here, especially in our older clergy. And again, you've got to put it together in this tapestry. Peak of your career, you're in your 50s, you're getting closer to retirement, you know what the salary scales are. This is kind of a big deal. Now, putting this whole picture together, we asked our clergy, what percentage of you feel mild to overwhelming financial stress? This isn't what they're going to tell you at the parish council meeting. This is what they feel when they're in a secure place and can be honest. You can find that 68% are pretty stressed about it. And we know they don't know what to do about it because we know that from a previous data set. You can find that our younger clergy have more stress than obviously our clergy that are closer to retirement. And we think it's student debt. We didn't correlate the two, but that's what the Danielson Institute felt like from our data sets. Now, what we also found, again validating what we found from other studies, is that when a husband and a wife are in agreement, when it comes to money, there is less stress in the home. And that's critical. Again, a healthy marriage is the key to surviving as a priest. It gives you far more psychological resilience. What I found truly amazing is, when we saw this data and we were reviewing it last summer in July, we spent 3 days without air conditioning at St. Basil's from about 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the evening. And you know, St. Basil's can get hot without air conditioning in July, especially last July. And we were reviewing this data. We were amazed at this response. We were shocked that it wasn't higher. And I keep trying to fix this slide, and I apologize. It always goes back to this, so I'm so sorry. But what percentage of our clergy have thought about a career change? Well, the overwhelming majority haven't. But some have. And as lay people, you can understand why. We also asked our clergy, what percent of you have received any financial education? And obviously, their minds, their hearts are somewhere else. You know, they're called to do something more than worry about money. So you would expect this number to be low. But this number affords us opportunities. So part of the Lilly Endowment is that we are going to go to the seminary and do a financial literacy course there to the seminarians. We'll do it once a year for roughly the next 3 years to help our clergymen when they're young, to help them with budgeting, managing debt, etc. There are several clergymen over the years that told me years ago the seminary used to do that, and it was probably one of the most valuable courses I ever had, was managing my money when I was young. Now, you have to look at this, like, let's compare a Master's of Divinity graduate program with, say, a Master's in Accounting or a Master's, well, I guess Master's in Accounting doesn't apply, but say a law degree or a medical degree. There are a lot of things that you learn in medical school or law school and seminary that are the important things you need to know, but then these financial management things, etc., obviously that's not the focus. But now is our opportunity to change that paradigm and offer our clergy the education they need. In Atlanta, we asked our clergy, what kind of education do you feel like you need going forward, continuing ed? You can see, after pastoral skills on equal footing, so they were asked to identify 5 of 19 areas. That's how you get this number to be more than 100%. You can see that after pastoral skills and tied with spiritual growth is parish administration, finances, budget, and office administration, which is going to be the next topic in this workshop that'll be for clergy. So you have called, you have asked for this education. Now, what do the evangelicals do? What do they know? And again, the question was asked of the evangelicals, how confident are you shepherding your personal finances versus your parish finances? And what you find is they're very comfortable managing their personal finances, but you can see there's a big lag when it comes to parish finance. Again, very similar to what we're finding. Now, the Archdiocese does have confidential resources that are limited, but are there to help our clergy. It's not enough. That's why this need is so great, not only from a financial perspective, but from an emotional perspective, from a mentoring perspective. There's several areas. And we need, as laity, to empower these ministries and to encourage our leaders to enhance them for very obvious reasons. Now, how is the Ministerial Excellence Fund going to work? Which is what our clergy need to know, and also the laity need to know about how this program is going to work. So the Ministerial Excellence Fund is a ministry of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese through the Center for Family Care. Within the Center for Family Care is the Center for Clergy Care. Carrie Pappas is very active with that. I know many of you know that. And Father Pericles will be assisting Father Costa in this program. Father Pericles Callis in Connecticut. So the way it works, our goal is to enhance the effectiveness of our clergy family through financial education and very small alleviation grants. Because we know there's a need. You've seen the need. Clergy will receive grants of up to $10,000, but you have to fulfill certain grant activities over a year. Again, this isn't something that we designed. This programming was outlined to us by the Lilly Endowment on what has worked in dozens and dozens of dioceses around the country and other denominations. And the grant funds can be used for debt or health care, emergencies, etc. All clergy families are invited to participate, and the program is up and running. We are the first Metropolis. So you get to go first. There are already roughly 13 clergy through word of mouth who are already participating. That was as of a couple weeks ago. The number might be larger. And again, it will be rolled out to every metropolis around the country, through to the clergy and to the laity, because the need clearly is just so great right now.
Can you share what the grant activities are?
That's next. So, you have to submit a grant proposal to the Center for Family Care through this website. So, there are handouts there. These slides are all in this handout. Each proposal is going to be reviewed by a very small group of people, and I am not even on that committee. It is clergymen. Father Costa has very carefully chosen that group of people. It is a very discreet group. And your expenses for your educational activities will be covered. You'll have a checkup with a financial advisor. They will identify your financial issues, and they will help you create a budget plan, a plan to alleviate debt, etc. The stories that we have received from clergy that did this on their own, or just anecdotally, they're very impressive. All of our grantees will have to participate in 6 financial coaching sessions, the educational programs. The program this afternoon that follows this is one of the mandatory programs. These programs will be videotaped and also be on the Center for Family Care website for everyone to see. But you will have to participate in these programs. The program, we met with a number of different advisors, and what we were looking for was a financial advisor who had no bias. We didn't want to use companies that were selling things. And it's been very difficult to find financial planners that can cover the whole country. And the best program that we found was the Dave Ramsey course. So if you take the Dave Ramsey course and you provide the certificate that you completed the course, you get reimbursed for the Dave Ramsey course. That's part of the requirement to receive one of the grants. And although there are some things in there that we as a church don't completely agree with, the overwhelming majority of the information that the Dave Ramsey course provides is really excellent. It can be used by anyone, clergy or laity. In the metropolis of Detroit, I do know that Metropolitan Nicholas did train a couple of clergy to be trainers in the Dave Ramsey course, and they went around to the clergy and taught them the Dave Ramsey course. It was very effective. Now that program has lapsed, and they're working on a another program now, but it's been used effectively in the GOA. In the Dave Ramsey course, it's 9 weeks. There are a number of different topics that are covered. The program can be done in person via a book, on computer, etc., but you will have to complete the program and demonstrate the certificate. We'll also have these financial training participation presentations. This is the first. And grant proposals, again, can be sent here. This is the Clergy Initiative email, the Center for Family Care website. In summary, there are very few callings in life that are more meaningful and more satisfying. They can change lives like the priesthood can. You know, by the grace of God, I've been very fortunate. My father-in-law is now a retired Greek Orthodox priest, was a beautiful man. He has dementia now. The only thing he remembers are the hymns. So we sit down at the dinner table and we sing Christos Anesti and Plusi Eptochepsan. He doesn't remember my name, but he can sing Plusi Eptochepsan. He may not remember the words completely, but the notes, he's got them down. It's all we can do to not cry. It's something very deep. It's very powerful. If it wasn't for clergy, I wouldn't be half the man I am. We know through our research that there's a lot of evidence that clergy and their families are at significant risk for mental and physical problems, including trauma. We've heard stories over and over of clergy that have had a tough go, that have slipped. They're in a tough position. As laity, we have to realize that. We have to realize that they have a family too, and they have the same needs and wants and desires and goals and aspirations that all of us do, that they deserve a day off, that they deserve a week off, that they're not at our beck and call 24/7. We've also underappreciated the financial strain that our clergy are under. We never asked. We were scared to ask, but now we were forced to, and now we know. So the question is, what are we going to do now that we know? And we also know that our clergy aren't really equipped to manage these challenges because that's not where their mind is. And as laity, we've underappreciated the financial and emotional challenges that our clergy and their families face, and they've suffered in silence. So I go back to one of my early slides. This is where the dialogue begins. So the questions we have to ask ourselves is, whose challenges are these? And whose work is it going to be to address them? And who are the people, the leaders, the thought leaders, who are in the best position to make a difference? What are those strategies, and how can we leverage those to gain more efficiency and make the greatest impact? It'd be my pleasure to answer any questions. We'll take a brief break, and then we'll switch over, and Father Paul and Chris will take over. Chris.
Good. There were two handouts left in each chair. There were two handouts left in each chair, and one of them was meant for the clergy presentation. We only made enough for the clergy, so you lay it before you leave. If you wouldn't mind leaving those back in your chair. It has my name and Father Paul's name on it on the cover. So those are the clergy stuff. The secret is just we don't have enough copies other than for the clergy.
Yes, Father Airy.
Doctor, thank you for the presentation. Question, when you were showing that one slide where the remuneration for the clergy is like under $60,000, where does the remuneration scale come in, and why is that not being implemented in these different areas to try and, raise that up? Can you piggyback on that?
Yes, sir.
Is that total compensation?
That is the compensation that the clergy filled out, total compensation that they filled out. That's housing allowance, car, salary, the whole thing. Again, the clergy answered that. I can't answer that because we weren't looking at that. What we were looking at is what are they getting paid now, and that's what they're getting paid now. But clearly it's inadequate. Yes, Father.
Well, just a comment, one of the things that I'm grateful to you and for the rest of the folks that have been looking into this, because what has allowed this to occur in clergy families all over is the fact that nobody knew, and nobody was aware that this was going on, and we didn't know that nobody knew.
Correct.
And so this is just a wonderful way to kind of shine some light on there. And for instance, most of my congregation was shocked when they found out that I had a student loan debt from seminary.
Right.
They were amazed. What? And I told them, I said, no, Leadership 100 was wonderful to help with tuition, but when you have a family at seminary, you have housing costs, and you have, and when you said that about food stamps, all of us looked at each other and said, oh, yeah, man, we were on food stamps.
Right.
Oh, everybody in our building was on food stamps, and everybody was on mass health, and we always had to do it.
You know,
I'm grateful that you're talking about this.
Greek Orthodox Christians are great people. Look at what we as a church have accomplished. But we never knew. And I think this is the beginning of something very powerful that's going to happen in our church going forward. I have one question in the back, and then you'll be next, Father. So, yes, Father, I think we're at the tip of the iceberg, and I really do think that although we love building things, what we have to build is something far more profound and far deeper, and it's the bricks and mortar of people and hearts and souls.
My children are grateful to you.
Yes, sir. Here and then here.
Speaking from the laity side of the house, I think that if this information is put out so that we are aware of it, then when we're looking at the annual budget, when we're looking at too many times the laity side, all they see is, well, it's getting a house allowance, a car allowance, it's getting an insurance paid, we're paying that, it's Social Security, we're paying into his pension. They look at all this and they're not aware of the burden, the financial burden that they come to us with. And I think if we can get that education out to the laity, the lay people, so that they have a better grasp and understanding of what our priests are dealing with.
Oh, I agree with you, Jim.
Benefit the priest by our knowledge and better ability to give a realistic, budget to increase their salaries.
So it'll be my pleasure to come to your parish on any day that you would like for me to get the word out. You just pick the day and I'll be there.
Got it.
Okay? I'm coming. I'm sorry, Father, and then...
I thank you. This is probably one of the most enlightening, not only enlightening, but I think needed presentations that we have had in my many, many years of attending various conferences and congresses. So thank you. Thank all of you guys for doing this. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of all of the clergy. I am not a constant nor big listener to Dave Ramsey, but periodically I do put him on the radio. I think maybe many of you may do the same thing. But what we're seeing here, and respectfully I say this too, because I've been on the other side now. I'm on the low end. Now I'm not on the high end, but at least I'm not worried about where my next meal is coming from. I do see that even, Aaron, to bring up a good point as we need to address, clergy compensation is a big issue. And the expectations and the assumptions, no question. From the lay side is that we work 1 day a week, 1 hour a week, so we're getting paid for what we're doing.
Right.
But the fact also goes, as Dave Ramsey says, many times, it's not what you make, it's what you say. It's not necessarily, I could be making $300,000 a year, and I could be spending $400,000, so I'm still in the same boat. The problem is here is we don't know how.
Exactly.
The issue, I think, is to get to address the symptom rather than the cause, rather than just to put a Band-Aid over the symptom. Wow, we can go up. We can ask our parishes to go up in our salary packages, etc., but we're still going to be coming right back to the same situation. But the idea is, what can we do to increase our education? Hence, what you said, I think it should be, if I'm really serious about what I want to do, get into this, the Financial Peace University. Get a book. It's not a whole heck. It doesn't take rocket science. It's just a case of trying to figure out what I need to do to apply to my family or my needs and where I am in my life and in my ministry. So I think this is the big message that I received with all of these other fantastic bits of information. This is the big message. Some of this is my own stinking fault. So I need to address what I need to be doing to make my family's situation better.
Thank you. So there are 2 points, and then so the first is one is an observation. Look at how many clergy are in here. That's how important this is. At a clergy laity, usually the laity and the clergy, all of us, we're all guilty of this. I've been in the bar many a time till 2 o'clock in the morning, because it's more fun to be in the bar than to be in the seminars, okay? I hope you're not taping that, because you need to turn that off, because my wife will shoot me. Bill agrees, so clearly you need to back up and take that one out. But the need is so great that look at this attendance. But we still have a lot of work to do as it relates to the laity. The second is when we sent out that survey for the Lilly initiative, the comments numbered in the hundreds. So not only did the clergy fill out the survey, but this survey was so important and so relevant that every single clergyman took the time to write not one comment, but multiple comments. That's how important this is.
To piggyback on what this gentleman said, this has been a real eye-opener for me as a layperson. And as I go back to my parish and share this with the parish council, who needs to learn it first, I can't help but wonder, as throughout the diocese, when there's regional types of activities or meetings, that we don't share this information with the other lay people.
Correct.
Because they need to know this.
The plan is that it'll go to the president's meeting at the Metropolis. Father George has already committed to that. And it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to, if we can work it out. Pensacola's an hour away, an hour and 15 minutes away, but I'll come to your parish if you want me to. Might take a while, but I'll be there. We can make this work. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I don't know if it was brought up on this, but what percentage, or in the research that you find out, what percentage of priests paid under the suggested scale?
We stratified it based on the scale. What we saw in the comments is it seemed like many priests, and I can't give you a number because we didn't ask that specifically, were under the scale, but we get the impression that a large number of the clergy are under the scale, especially the older clergy, because what they're doing is they're saying, I'm fine, I don't want to hurt the parish, so they intentionally don't take the raises. There's a fair number of, a fairly large percentage of that's going on right now. Yes, sir.
A little bit closer to the presentation of a lot of these things, and kind of later on in life, still working paycheck to paycheck, in my late 40s. President Pettis, associate director, she's a practicing physician, and still being paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
What a lot of people don't realize, and I found this after her program, is financial advisors, depending on if they're out there, there's some questions to ask them, whether they're fiduciary, and there's some interesting things we can talk to me afterwards, but they don't necessarily charge you a fee for working. They get paid commissions from the products that
Correct.
they do. So going to see a financial advisor doesn't cost you.
Correct.
Then to walk you through some of these things. So don't be afraid of that. I never wanted to go because they don't know how much it's going to cost exactly. But if you go to them, they'll talk you through this stuff, and then they'll try to find you the products that are best for you, and that's how they get their compensation.
So one of the points that we've made without making is that although the defined benefit plan of the Archdiocese at 5% is not bad at all, it's not enough. It's maybe half of what you need. So you're going to have a 401k or a Roth or something above and beyond that. Yes, and you go to your broker, you know, there are plenty of parishioners you can probably go to that'll tell you who a good broker is in your community. You can set up your Roth or your 401k, and then you can adequately save for the future. Now, there's a fair amount of questions, and I've lost track on who is next.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for your wonderful, eye-opening presentation, number one. Number two, I want to take a different tack.
Yes, sir.
And the different tack is basically, I'm close to retirement, so I've faced a lot of these issues, and thank God that I'm getting to that point, because it's been a wonderful ministry, and loved it. It's been an inspiring ministry, hopefully to others, and has been for myself and for my family. What I want to point out is that as clergy, now I'm speaking to the clergy, we have to look at ourselves not as people who are dependent on others, but people who make their own decisions, adult decisions, when we get to different points in life.
Correct.
And so as soon as my children were at a certain point of development and have grown up, one of the discussions that I had with Presbytera is, honey, what are we going to do? We're going to need to do this. We're going to have to put our kids through college. We're going to have to prepare for retirement. And so the understanding was that there was plenty of time in life to be able to develop a career and a future. And so that was to get to that point, to be able to get there, because we also knew that the world around us was changing, and we had to consider ourselves as two-income families. And so, and all I'm suggesting here is that I think the facts that you have in front of us are very important, very relevant, but I think speaking to clergy, and the room is full of clergy, I think we have to take our lives and our future in our hands.
Right, that's why the slide, money doesn't solve money problems, was in there.
Exactly.
That's exactly why that was there, is for this comment.
And to be honest with you, it's kind of liberating to think along those lines.
Yes.
Because there's not going to be some institution or entity that's going to take care of ourselves, take care of us. Yes, somebody will help us, but we will also be helping
Right.
ourselves.
This isn't Sophocles. No, you're perfect. Yeah, this isn't Sophocles. There is no Dux Ex Machina that's going to come in at the end and fix our problems. Father in the back, and then you'll be next.
Is any correlation between the financial problems of the clergy and the parish church? In other words, is any impact in those?
What the Lilly data has shown in other churches is clergymen who experience greater financial stress, what they look at is there are different metrics they look at. Those churches aren't as, say, vibrant as churches where the clergy have less financial stress. There's actually a book that was published that kind of looked at that indirectly, and so the answer is yes.
One more question. If we look to see in the seminary preparation for priesthood, if we can enhance administrative and financial,
We had an in-depth conversation. This presentation there was a brief 11-minute presentation made at Leadership 100. And at Leadership 100, I spoke privately with Father Chris, and there's some movement in that direction. There's some people they want to bring in to teach more parish administration, yes. So the seminary understands there's a need there, and that those topics need to be covered a little more thoroughly. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, I'm sorry. She was first.
Since 1984, both local and national, this is the first time anything of this sort was presented to us. This is something that we should have a national ministry to go around and tell you all of the churches in every community. It's a big secret. People don't really know the problem and the strife.
Until last year, we didn't know, because we were too scared to ask. We knew a little bit, but yes.
It's
It's the start. This is the inauguration. This is the first program. Huh? It is going national. This is program number 1 of dozens of programs over the next 3 years. Father.
First off, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Very, very well done. And I want to thank you also for sharing your personal accounts, because we priests can relate to those situations and touch our hearts. I want to thank him also for sharing his personal account, which touched our hearts. Because priests know that, feel that, take that home to our families. So thank you for sharing that. Father Tom, you're absolutely right. We have to look at both sides of the equation, not just the revenue. We can raise it to $300,097, we spend $400, we're still going to go in debt. You're right. We have to be accountable and responsible to ourselves and to our families and to our communities by being responsible for their money. And I think they need to really start something at the seminary for basic budgeting, basic savings, retirement plans, paying off those credit cards first, which Dave Ramsey was going to say. And when I was at the seminary, there were many seminarians that didn't even know how to balance a checking account. Some didn't have checking accounts. They're going to go out to their parishes, and some of them prominent, we're going to have CPAs and lawyers and very high-powered people. How are they going to look at a budget and be able to understand that and help guide them and get into it? How are they going to be able to really empathize with their parish council members and the stresses of the finances and the budgets in the communities? How are they going to be able to help themselves? So it's very important that we start at the seminary. And also, this is a great awareness for all of our people, because so many of our people in the parish do not know that many of our seminarians come out with this great amount of debt and stress, and they use credit cards. They're only digging a bigger and bigger hole, and then they get the financial pressures and stress in the families, and then they self-medicate. My parents' generation, they've been smoking. Who knows what they're using now? The socially acceptable thing for us as priests is eat. So they take comfort in eating and working on the clergy pension. I know that for our health insurance, we are, as a group, morbidly obese, because that affects our health and our insurance premiums. Okay? And that's because that is socially acceptable to eat, get comfortable. You can't do the others. The others are not like to do and won't do. And that is sad. And the average clergy pension, just so you know, is about $16,500. That's not a lot of money. It's very modest. And we pray and hope we won't have to take a haircut with our Social Security, right? And that's pretty much for most of us all that we have. So we have to be educated and empowered to save money, so we can put more money aside, max out our Roths, maybe even our 403Bs. And this is so important. This is a beautiful thing that you're doing, that the Archdiocese is doing, and I hope this goes nationwide for everybody's benefit. Not just for the clergy families, but ultimately for our parishes and our Archdiocese and Church of Christ at large. Because a healthy priest is the best priest.
Correct. Thank you, Father. So, just a moment, Father. There are two important points. The first is that if you look at, say, the average physician in my community, they're making somewhere in the high 2s to low 3s. 250 to 350, you know. Most of us in this room would say, I could live very well on that. Do you know what percentage of those physicians do not fully fund their retirement plan? This is what my accountants tell me. Half. Half. Doesn't matter how much money you have. It's how much you save. And this program is on behalf of Father Costa. He couldn't be here, so it's not my program, it's Father Costa's program. I'm just here on his behalf. And there's a question in the back, please.
If all the ladies are leaving, if you would hand me this presentation before you go, you pick one up because we got to hand these out to the clergy.
Yes.
All this will be available to everybody, and these programs will be a part of our Metropolis paid forum. So as we travel to Metropolis, the story will be traveling with us. So lady on, if you pick up handouts, please give.
So we'll adjourn for like 10 minutes. Can we come back at